How did the medieval world, often painted as a man's stage, witness queens riding into the chaos of battle, commanding armies and defying expectations? For centuries, between the years 500 and 1500, a select few queens shattered the traditional roles, not with gentle diplomacy from a throne, but with steel strategy and unyielding will on the battlefield. Number 7. Zenobia of Palmyra. The sun beat down on the golden city of Palmyra, a vibrant oasis in the Syrian desert, a vital hub connecting east and west. It was the 3rd century, and Rome's vast empire was crumbling under its own weight, fractured by internal strife and external threats. In this tumultuous period, a woman named Zenobia rose to power. Her husband, Odenathus, the king of Palmyra, had been a loyal Roman client, ruler protecting the eastern borders. But when he and his son were assassinated, the fate of Palmyra fell into Zenobia's hands. She initially ruled as regent for her young son Vabalethus, but soon her ambitions, her sharp mind, and her formidable presence became clear. Historical texts describe her as a woman of striking beauty, with dark eyes, a powerful intellect, and a command of several languages, including Greek and Egyptian. More than that, she was a warrior, a hunter, and a strategist, often marching with her soldiers, sometimes even covering long distances on foot alongside them. Zenobia's vision stretched far beyond Palmyra's desert borders. She saw the Roman Empire in disarray and recognized an opportunity to forge her own dominion. Her armies, composed of Palmyrene, heavy cavalry, archers, and light infantry, were highly trained and fiercely loyal. Under her direct command, these forces embarked on an audacious campaign of expansion. They swept through Syria, taking province after province. Then, with swift precision, they moved south, conquering Egypt, one of Rome's most vital breadbaskets. The Roman prefect of Egypt, Tenagino attempted to resist, but Zenobia's general, Zabdus, defeated his forces in a decisive battle. Egypt, for the first time in centuries, was under the rule of an Eastern queen. But Zenobia did not stop there. Her armies marched west, conquering large parts of Asia Minor, reaching as far as Ankara in modern-day Turkey. At its height, the Palmyrene Empire, under Zenobia's command, stretched from Egypt to central Anatolia, a vast new power challenging Rome's very existence in the east. She declared herself Empress, her son Vabalethus Emperor, and began to mint coins bearing their images, overtly proclaiming their independence from Rome. This was not a passive act of regency. This was an active, aggressive military campaign led by a monarch who envisioned herself as the heir to Cleopatra and Alexander the Great. Rome, however, was not yet broken. A new, strong emperor, Aurelian, rose to power, determined to restore the empire's unity and strength. He understood the grave threat posed by Zenobia's burgeoning empire. In 272 AD, Aurelian launched a massive counteroffensive to reclaim the lost territories. Zenobia, ready for the challenge, personally led her armies into the field to confront the Roman legions. The first major confrontation occurred at Hyme, near Antioch. Zenobia's renowned Palmyrene heavy cavalry, known as Clebanari, clad in full armor, charged with devastating force. However, Aurelian's tactical brilliance shone through. He feigned a retreat, drawing out the heavily armored Palmyrene cavalry in the summer heat, exhausting them. Then his lighter Roman cavalry turned and engaged the fatigued Palmyrenes, breaking their formations. Despite this initial setback, Zenobia rallied her forces and prepared for another stand. The decisive battle took place at Emesa, modern-day Homs. Zenobia once again led her troops, inspiring them with her presence and courage. The Palmyrene cavalry, though weakened by the previous engagement, fought valiantly. For a time, the battle raged fiercely, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Roman chroniclers described the ferocity of the fighting, with Zenobia's soldiers displaying remarkable tenacity. However, the superior discipline and experience of the Roman legions, coupled with Aurelian's strategic genius, eventually prevailed. The Palmyrene army was decisively defeated, Suffering immense losses, Zenobia was forced to retreat, abandoning Syria and falling back to her capital, Palmyra. Aurelian pursued her relentlessly, besieging the city of Palmyra itself. The city was heavily fortified, and Zenobia commanded its defense with her characteristic determination. She ordered the construction of defensive works and personally oversaw the preparations for a protracted siege. The Roman army, however, brought superior siege engines in overwhelming numbers. As the siege dragged on and realizing that the city could not hold out indefinitely, Zenobia made a desperate attempt to escape. She mounted a swift camel, intending to flee to Persia to seek aid from the Sasanian Empire. However, Roman cavalry patrols intercepted her near the Euphrates River. Zenobia, the warrior queen who had dared to challenge Rome, was captured. Her reign, though glorious and ambitious, had come to an end. She was brought before Aurelian and eventually, according to historical accounts, paraded in his triumph in Rome, a testament to her extraordinary defiance and the Roman victory. Her story stands as a monumental example of a medieval queen who not only commanded but personally led armies into the crucible of battle, forging an empire through her sheer will and military prowess. Number 6. Seondeok of Silla. In the mid-7th century, the Korean peninsula was a volatile land, divided among 3 rival kingdoms: Goguryeo in the north, Baekje in the southwest, and Silla in the southeast. It was a time of constant warfare, shifting alliances, and fierce competition for dominance. Amidst this turbulent landscape, a woman named Seondeok ascended the throne of Silla in 632 AD. She was the first reigning queen of Silla, a remarkable achievement in a society that, while relatively open to female leadership, compared to some of its contemporaries, still largely favored male succession. Her father, King Jimpyeong, had no male heir, and Seondeok, known for her intelligence, wisdom, and foresight, was chosen to lead the kingdom. Seondeok's reign was far from peaceful. Silla was a relatively smaller kingdom, constantly threatened by its more powerful neighbors, especially Baekje. Baekje, under its aggressive King Yuhe, launched relentless attacks on Silla's western borders, aiming to expand its territory and weaken its rival. These were not minor skirmishes. These were large-scale invasions that threatened Silla's very existence. As Queen, Seondeok was not merely a figurehead. She was the supreme commander of Silla's military. Her leadership involved making critical strategic decisions, deploying armies, and directing defenses against the constant incursions. One of the most pressing challenges during Seondeok's reign was the series of devastating attacks by Baekje. In 642 AD, Baekje forces, led by General Yusuk, launched a major offensive, capturing several Silla fortresses. The most significant loss was Daea Fortress, a crucial strategic point. The fall of Daea Fortress was a severe blow, not only because of its military importance, but also due to the symbolic impact of the loss, as it represented a major defeat for Silla. This event reportedly caused great distress in the Silla court, highlighting the precariousness of their situation. Seondeok, as the monarch, had to respond decisively. While historical records do not explicitly state that Seondeok personally rode into the thick of battle with a sword, they do depict her as deeply involved in military affairs, devising strategies, appointing generals, and inspiring her troops. Her role was that of a supreme commander who directed the war effort. She understood that Silla could not defeat Baekje alone. She embarked on a crucial diplomatic mission, forging an alliance with Tang China, a powerful empire to the west. This alliance, initially difficult to secure, was a testament to her political acumen and determination. She dispatched skilled envoys, including the famed Kim Chunchu, who would later become King Mayul, to Tang China to appeal for military assistance. Despite the ongoing diplomatic efforts, Baekje's attacks continued in 643 AD. Baekje forces besieged Noryang Fortress. This was another critical defensive position, and its fall would have opened up central Silla to further invasion. Seondeok had to make immediate and effective military decisions. She dispatched Xia armies to relieve the besieged fortresses and engage the Baekje invaders, while the generals, on the ground, executed the direct combat. Seondeok's command center would have been the source of the strategic directives, resource allocation, and overall military policy. Her generals, like the celebrated Kim Yu-sin, carried out her commands in the field, leading Xia's elite Kwarang warrior youth corps and regular troops into intense combat. The diplomatic efforts with Tang China eventually bore fruit, though not immediately. Tang Emperor Taizong, initially hesitant, eventually agreed to provide aid to Xia, seeing the strategic benefit of weakening Baekje and Goguryeo. This alliance would fundamentally alter the balance of power on the Korean peninsula. However, Seondeok did not live to see the full fruits of her diplomatic and military strategies. She passed away in 647 AD, after 15 years on the throne. Her military legacy, however, paved the way for Sila's eventual triumph. She strengthened the kingdom's defenses, endured constant attacks, and most importantly established the crucial alliance with Tang China that would lead to Sia's unification of the peninsula decades later. Chroniclers of the period, such as those who compiled the Samguk Segi, or Chronicles of the Three Kingdoms, often highlight her wisdom and her foresight. Although the precise details of her direct battlefield presence are not as dramatic as some other queens who initiated and sustained the war effort, made critical strategic decisions, and held her kingdom together under immense pressure, firmly places her as a queen who led her armies through some of the most challenging periods in Sia's history. She led not just by presence but by pivotal strategic command and enduring resilience in the face of relentless external military aggression. Number 5. Oraka of Leyon and Castile. The early 12th century in the Iberian Peninsula was a patchwork of Christian kingdoms, constantly vying for power and territory, often against each other, as much as against the remaining Muslim strongholds to the south. In this tumultuous environment, Oraka ascended the throne of Leyon and Castile in 1109, inheriting a complex realm beset by internal dissent and external pressures. She was the eldest surviving child of King Alfonso VI, a powerful monarch who had unified much of the Christian north. Her ascension was groundbreaking, as she was the first full queen regnant of Leyon and Castile, ruling in her own right. But her reign was anything but serene. Oraka's life immediately became entangled in a web of political marriages and military conflicts. To strengthen her position and unify the Christian kingdoms, she was married to Alfonso I, the King of Aragon and Navarre, a fierce warrior king known as the Battler. The union was fraught with personal animosity and a bitter power struggle as Alfonso I attempted to assert his authority over Oraka's kingdom, essentially trying to absorb Leyon and Castile into his Aragonese dominion. This ignited a devastating civil war, with Oraka leading her own forces against her husband's armies. This was not a war fought through proxies or advisors. Oraka actively commanded her armies in the field. She rode with her troops, engaged in sieges, and personally directed military campaigns against her estranged husband, as well as against rebellious nobles within her own kingdom, and even her half-sister Teresa, who ruled the county of Portugal. Medieval chronicles, such as the Historia Compostelana, provide glimpses into Oraka's relentless military activity. She was a queen constantly on the move, leading her retinue of loyal knights and soldiers from one stronghold to another, suppressing rebellions or confronting external threats. One significant episode occurred in 1111, early in her reign, when Oraka and Alfonso I of Aragon clashed at the Battle of Candispina. While the exact details of her direct combat role are debated among historians, it is clear that she was present, and her presence inspired her loyal Castilian and Leonese forces. Her forces suffered a defeat in this engagement, highlighting the brutal realities of her reign, but Oraka, known for her tenacity, did not give up. She continued to rally her supporters and raise new armies. The fighting between her and Alfonso I dragged on for years, a series of battles, sieges, and uneasy truces that constantly broke down. Oraka's military challenges were compounded by the opportunistic actions of various nobles and factions. Some supported her, others her husband, and still others sought to carve out their own independent territories from the chaos. She had to besiege rebellious castles, force submission from powerful lords, and demonstrate her authority through military might. One notable incident involved the city of Palencia, which rebelled against her. Oraka personally led a siege against the city, demonstrating her resolve to crush dissent. Her presence at such sieges was crucial, as it projected the authority of the crown and inspired loyalty among her troops. Beyond her conflicts with Alfonso I, Oraka also faced the formidable challenge of her half-sister Teresa of Portugal. Teresa, regent for her young son, Afonso Henriques, harbored ambitions to expand her territory and establish an independent Portuguese kingdom. This led to military clashes between the forces of the two sisters. Oraka personally led expeditions against Teresa's forces in the western reaches of her kingdom, fighting to maintain control over her hereditary lands. Chronicles depict her as a pragmatic ruler who understood that her authority had to be defended with force. Despite the constant warfare and political turmoil that defined her reign, Oraka managed to hold her kingdom together. She skillfully navigated the treacherous political landscape, using alliances, diplomacy, and direct military action to maintain her position. Her reign was marked by a relentless struggle for power, often fought on the battlefield. When she died in 1126, she bequeathed a united though still troubled kingdom to her son Alfonso VII. Her legacy is one of a queen who defied the conventions of her time, not just by ruling in her own right, but by actively leading her armies through civil wars and countless conflicts, proving that a queen could be as formidable a commander as any king in the brutal world of medieval warfare. Her life stands as a testament to her unyielding will and her direct engagement in the military struggles that shaped her kingdom. Number 4. Matilda of Tuscany. The 11th century in Europe was a time of immense power. Struggles particularly between the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope, a conflict known as the investiture controversy. It was a dispute over who held the authority to appoint bishops, a matter of both spiritual and temporal power. In the heart of this conflict stood Matilda of Tuscany, a woman of extraordinary influence and power, often described as one of the most formidable women of the Middle Ages. Born around 1046, she inherited vast territories in northern Italy, stretching from Mantua to present-day Lazio. Her lands were strategically vital, controlling key routes between Germany and Rome. Matilda was a staunch and unwavering supporter of the papacy. Her loyalty to Pope Gregory VII and his successors made her a central figure in the investiture controversy, placing her directly in opposition to the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry IV. This was not a passive political stance. It meant engaging in decades of intense military conflict. Matilda commanded her own substantial armies, composed of loyal Tuscan and Lombard knights and infantry. She personally led these forces into battle and siege, often riding at the head of her troops. Chroniclers of the time, including Donio, who wrote a biographical poem about her, depicted her as a warrior queen, a formidable leader who could inspire her soldiers and outmaneuver her enemies. The conflict with Henry IV escalated into open warfare. Henry IV considered Matilda's unwavering support for the Pope a direct challenge to his imperial authority and a blockade to his ambitions in Italy. He launched several campaigns into Italy to assert his control and crush the papal loyalists. Matilda, in response, mobilized her armies. Territories became the main battleground for the papal and imperial forces. She was not just a financer or an organizer. She was a direct commander. One of the most significant confrontations occurred in 1084, after Henry IV had marched on Rome and installed an anti-pope. Matilda, leading her forces, attempted to relieve Rome and support Gregory VII. Her campaigns were characterized by swift movements and aggressive tactics. Although Henry IV temporarily occupied Rome, Matilda's continued military pressure and control over key territories kept the emperor from fully consolidating his power in Italy. She maintained crucial supply lines and disrupted imperial communication. A decisive moment came in 1090. Henry IV again invaded Italy with a large army, aiming to decisively defeat Matilda and her papal forces. Matilda, recognizing the gravity of the threat, prepared for a major engagement. She gathered her loyal vassals and their troops, demonstrating her remarkable ability to command feudal loyalty and rally support. The fighting was fierce and protracted. In 1092, Matilda's forces achieved a significant victory at the Battle of Canossa. Although detailed accounts of her direct combat role in the thick of the fighting are scarce, it is clear that she was the strategic mastermind and the commander who rallied her troops. This victory was a morale boost for the papal cause and a setback for Henry IV, forcing him to reconsider his approach. Perhaps an even more direct example of her military command came with the Battle of Volta Mantovana in 1080. While facing the imperial forces near Mantua, Matilda's army engaged in a major battle. She was present, overseeing the deployment of her troops and directing the fight. Though her forces suffered a defeat there, it only spurred her to greater efforts. She regrouped, continued to recruit, and remained an active military leader. Her resilience in the face of setbacks was legendary. She consistently raised new armies and launched counteroffensives, proving herself a relentless adversary. Matilda's military leadership extended beyond pitched battles. She oversaw the defense of numerous castles and fortified towns, deploying garrisons and directing their defenses during sieges. Her strategic control of the Apennine passes was crucial in limiting Henry IV's movements in Italy. She was also known for her punitive expeditions against rebellious vassals or cities that sided with the emperor. These actions required direct military planning and often her personal supervision. For over 3 decades, Matilda of Tuscany maintained her military command, challenging an emperor and defending the papacy through force of arms. She was a master of logistics, strategy, and leadership, capable of inspiring loyalty and fear in equal measure. When she died in 1115, she left behind a legacy not just as a powerful landowner or a religious devotee, but as a formidable military commander who personally led her armies through some of the most complex and brutal conflicts. Her story is a testament to the fact that power in the Middle Ages was often won and defended, not just with words, but with swords, and Matilda was ready to wield them. Number 3. Philippa of Hyne. The mid-14th century was a period defined by the 100 Years' War, a long and brutal conflict between England and France. While English kings like Edward III led grand campaigns across the Channel, the home front was not always quiet. In 1346, King Edward III was deeply engaged in France, culminating in the famous victory at the Battle of Crecy. During his absence, England faced a significant threat from its northern neighbor, Scotland. David II, the King of Scots, seizing the opportunity of Edward's absence, launched a major invasion of northern England, aiming to reclaim lost territories and weaken his old adversary. It was in this critical moment that Queen Philippa of Hyne, Edward III's queen, stepped forward. Although typically seen as a diplomatic and gracious queen, she proved herself a formidable military leader when the need arose. With the king and many of England's most experienced commanders in fighting and abroad, the defense of the kingdom largely fell to her. She was not a passive regent. She actively took charge of the realm's military defense. Philippa quickly began to mobilize the northern English army. This was not a small undertaking. It involved issuing royal writs, coordinating with the northern lords, raising levies, and ensuring supplies and logistics for a significant fighting force. Chronicles of the time, such as those by Jean Froissart, describe her active role. She rode north from London, inspiring the troops and taking personal command of the preparations. Her presence was crucial for rallying the morale of the English forces, which were composed of a mix of local levies, knights, and the remaining veterans from the Scottish borders. The Scottish army, estimated to be around 12,000 strong, advanced into Durham, causing devastation. They were a well-equipped force, including their formidable pikemen. The English forces numbering around 7,000 to 8,000, were largely composed of hastily assembled troops, though they benefited from the tactical innovations of their longbowmen, which had proved so effective at Crécy. On October 17, 1346, the two armies met at Neville's Cross just west of Durham. Queen Philippa was present on the battlefield, according to Froissart's chronicle. Before the battle commenced, she rode among the English troops, addressing them with powerful words. She reminded them of their duty to their king and kingdom, encouraged them to fight bravely, and promised God's favor. She was dressed in armor, a clear symbol of her commitment to the defense of the realm. Her presence was not merely ceremonial, it was a direct act of leadership, inspiring her soldiers on the eve of a potentially catastrophic engagement. The English army, under the immediate command of figures like Henry Percy and Ralph Neville, took up a strong defensive position. The Scottish attack was fierce, but the English longbowmen rained down volleys of arrows, disrupting the Scottish formations. The battle was hard-fought, with both sides displaying courage and determination. The presence of their queen, riding among them and encouraging them, certainly bolstered the English resolve. As the battle turned in favor of the English, the Scottish forces were routed. King David II was captured, a massive victory for England. The victory at Neville's Cross was a strategic triumph of immense importance. It neutralized the Scottish threat for many years, securing England's northern border and allowing King Edward III to continue his campaigns in France without fear of invasion. This decisive win was achieved under the direct military leadership and inspiration of Queen Philippa. She was not just a queen who supervised from a distance. She was a queen who rode to the front, addressed her soldiers, and directly contributed to the success of a major military engagement. Her leadership in this crucial moment solidified her reputation as a capable and courageous queen, proving that even in the absence of her warrior husband, the defense of England was in strong and determined hands. Her actions at Neville's Cross stand as a powerful example of a medieval queen who led an army to a significant victory on the battlefield. Number 2. Margaret of Anjou. The mid-15th century in England was plunged into chaos by the Wars of the Roses, a brutal dynastic struggle between the houses of Lancaster and York. At the very heart of the Lancastrian cause, leading its armies with fierce determination, was Queen Margaret of Anjou, married to King Henry VI, a gentle but often frail and mentally unstable monarch. Margaret found herself thrust into the role of a political and military leader, fighting tirelessly to secure her husband's throne and the succession of her young son, Edward of Westminster. Margaret arrived in England in 1445, a French princess, initially perceived as graceful and diplomatic. But as Henry VI's mental health deteriorated, and as the Yorkist challenge mounted, Margaret transformed into a formidable, almost relentless warrior queen. She personally raised armies, directed campaigns, and often rode at the head of her troops, inspiring loyalty and fear in equal measure. She understood that the Lancastrian cause would not survive without her direct military intervention and unyielding will. Conflict escalated dramatically in 1455 with the First Battle of St. Albans, where the Duke of York gained a victory and captured Henry VI. This defeat only hardened Margaret's resolve. She would spend the next decade campaigning relentlessly, raising armies from her supporters in the north of England, an area that remained staunchly Lancastrian. She traveled extensively, rallying nobles and commoners, organizing supply lines, and strategizing with her commanders. Her determination was unwavering even in the face of immense personal danger and repeated setbacks. In December 1460, Margaret achieved a major victory at the Battle of Wakefield. Having gathered a substantial Lancastrian army, she confronted the Duke of York and his forces. Although accounts differ on her exact position on the battlefield, it is clear that she was the supreme commander, orchestrating the Lancastrian movements. The Yorkist army was decisively defeated, and Richard, Duke of York, along with his son Edmund, Earl of Rutland, were killed. This victory was a massive boost for the Lancastrian cause and a testament to Margaret's military leadership. Soon after Wakefield, in February 1461, Margaret led her army south, aiming to relieve Henry VI, who was held captive in London. She met the main Yorkist army at the Second Battle of St. Albans. This time, Margaret's forces achieved a decisive victory. She personally directed her army, which successfully outmaneuvered the Yorkists. King Henry VI was liberated, a moment of triumph for the Lancastrian cause. Her presence at these battles, her decisions regarding troop movements, and her unyielding resolve played critical roles. In these victories, however, the Wars of the Roses were a pendulum of fortunes. The Yorkists, led by Edward IV, quickly regrouped. In March 1461, the two sides clashed again at the Battle of Towton, one of the largest and bloodiest battles on English soil. Margaret, though not on the battlefield itself, was the strategic architect of the Lancastrian force. Having personally raised and directed them, the battle was a devastating defeat for the Lancastrians, forcing Margaret and Henry VI to flee into exile. Despite this crushing loss, Margaret refused to give up. For the next 9 years, she tirelessly campaigned from exile, primarily in France, raising funds, recruiting mercenaries, and securing alliances with foreign powers. She launched several attempts to invade England and reclaim the throne for her husband and son. She landed forces in the north of England, fought skirmishes, and besieged castles. Her military efforts were ceaseless, driven by a fierce desire to protect her family's claim. In 1470, she secured an unlikely alliance with Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, who had previously been a staunch Yorkist, but now turned against Edward IV. This alliance led to the brief restoration of Henry VI to the throne. Margaret then returned to England in 1471 with a new army. However, fate was against her. Her forces suffered final decisive defeats at the battles of Barnet and Tewkesbury. At Tewkesbury, her son Prince Edward was killed, and Margaret herself was captured. Margaret of Anju was not merely a queen who commissioned armies. She was a queen who actively led them into the brutality of civil war for decades. She endured countless hardships, betrayals, and devastating losses, yet her resolve to fight for her dynasty never wavered. Her story is one of unparalleled military leadership and unyielding determination. In the face of overwhelming odds, solidifying her place as one of the most formidable warrior queens of the medieval era. Number 1. Isabella I of Castile. In the late 15th century, the Iberian Peninsula was poised for a dramatic transformation. The long centuries of the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of Muslim Spain, were drawing to a close. The helm of this momentous period was Isabella I of Castile, a queen whose reign was marked by military expansion, strategic brilliance, and her personal presence on the battlefields of Granada. She ascended the throne in 1474, and alongside her husband, Ferdinand II of Aragon, she embarked on a mission to unify Spain and complete the Reconquista. Isabella was not just a queen who sent her armies to war. She was intimately involved in the military operations. She understood the importance of presence, logistics, and morale. The Granada War, which began in 1482, was a decade-long struggle to conquer the last Muslim kingdom in Western Europe. Isabella actively participated in this war, often personally riding to the front lines, establishing royal camps near the besieged cities, and making critical decisions about strategy, funding, and troop deployment. She reformed the Castilian army, improving its organization, discipline, and logistics. She ensured that troops were paid regularly, a novelty that significantly reduced desertion and increased loyalty. She oversaw the development of new military techniques, including the use of artillery, which proved devastating against the Moorish fortification. Chronicles of the time, such as those written by Andres Bernaldez, known as the Curate of Palacios, provide vivid accounts of Isabella's personal involvement in the war. He notes her constant presence in the field and her direct influence on military operations. One of the most significant examples of her military leadership came during the various sieges of the Granada War. Isabella established elaborate and well-provisioned royal camps outside besieged cities. These were not just temporary residences. They were centers of military command, logistical hubs, and moral rallying points. At the Siege of Baza in 1489, for instance, the siege dragged on for months, testing the resolve of the Castilian forces. The conditions were harsh, and morale began to flag. Isabella arrived at the camp, bringing with her not only essential supplies, but also her unwavering determination. She rode among the troops, personally inspecting their conditions, speaking with soldiers and reinforcing their resolve. Her presence alone, according to contemporary accounts, had a profound effect, bolstering the spirits of the army and preventing desertion. She even sold her own jewels to finance the continuation of the siege, demonstrating her complete commitment. Baza eventually fell, a direct result of the sustained effort she commanded. Perhaps the most iconic example of her battlefield presence was during the Siege of Granada, the capital of the last Moorish kingdom. This final siege, beginning in 1491, was a monumental undertaking. To demonstrate their unyielding resolve and to ensure the army remained firmly committed, Isabella and Ferdinand ordered the construction of a permanent city, Santa Fe, just outside the walls of Granada. Isabella herself personally oversaw the construction of this military city, a testament to her dedication to the long and arduous siege. She rode daily through the camp, attended strategy meetings, and made decisions regarding the progress of the siege. When a fire accidentally destroyed part of the royal camp, Isabella insisted that a more permanent stone city be built in its place, signaling to both her own troops and the besieged defenders that the Castilians were not leaving until Granada fell. This act of determination, directly initiated and overseen by Isabella, was a powerful psychological weapon. In January 1492, after months of relentless pressure, Granada finally surrendered. Isabella and Ferdinand, dressed in armor, rode triumphantly into the city, personally leading their conquering army. This was the culmination of a decade of Isabella's intense military command and her unwavering commitment to the Reconquista. She was not just a queen who funded wars. She was a queen who rode to the front lines, endured the hardships of campaigning, made strategic decisions, and personally inspired her soldiers to achieve one of the most significant military victories in Spanish history. Her leadership in the Granada War cemented her legacy as a formidable military commander and a driving force behind the creation of a unified Spain.